computer. And recording now. It should say recording on your screen. Do you see that? So we've, yep. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to the Homeschooling Global Summit 2020. Joining me today is Naimish Gohil from Satchel in London. Naimish, thanks so much for spending the time and coming on to the summit.
My pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So Naimish, tell us a little bit about what Satchel is and what it is that the service that you provide to schools and how you're helping schools and parents and the students all in the same space.
In summary, Dan, Satchel is essentially a learning platform. So we're used by 1 in 3 secondary schools here in the UK, and typically you'll see our teachers logging every day, where they'll be setting classwork for the students, so they can access all of their learning resources and instructions that they have to do from any mobile device. From a parent perspective, we'll give them a structure and a timetable so they can actually see what work their children have to do. And of course, from a school leadership perspective, we provide data and analytics so we can start to help shape are our students doing too much work or too little work, so they can actually have some quality time with their family when they're not working. So in a nutshell, that's essentially what our tool does. And we have around, since COVID-19 particularly, we have around 1 million students that use the product on a daily basis.
And this is global, right? It's not just a UK-based company.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so we started in the UK, but we've actually got customers in like over 23 countries, all the way from kind of Alaska to New Zealand.
Wow. So can you give us a little bit about your background? Because getting to know you a little bit off camera, I think it's really fascinating that you've kind of married your two passions, coming from a teaching background to a tech entrepreneur. And well, I won't give away too many spoilers, but could you just give us that little passage?
Yeah, sure. So I was always one of those kids that couldn't work and play, and so I ended up just playing all the time because I wanted to be a footballer. Anyway, that didn't turn out very well for me because I ended up getting all lower letters of the alphabet for my GCSEs. But after that point onwards, I certainly went to college, went to university, did computer science, and then ended up working as a software engineer for a few years. And after being fed up of eating sandwiches in Lisbon, because I was a vegetarian, I ended up coming back to the UK, and that's when I really got my first foray into teaching. I ended up doing some voluntary work, and I thought, this is pretty cool. Hadn't stepped inside a classroom since I left school. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed kind of working with the kids. It was just different. Something I really enjoyed, and that basically prompted me and gave me the push I needed to get into teaching. Ended up being a classroom teacher, and then within a short space of time, I think I was quite lucky. I ended up becoming an assistant head teacher across 2 schools in West London, and as part of my remit, I was in charge of implementing technology across the 2 schools that I was working at. At the time, technology was, well, I can say it was pretty bad. On paper, it had all the bells and whistles, but when you're a teacher in the trenches, teaching 4 or 5 lessons a day, you just don't have the skill set or the time or the patience to be an IT expert. You want to be, technology should be like electricity. You press the light switch and it just turns on and off. You don't have to think much about how it works. And I thought, given I was a geek and I was finding it hard to implement this technology, how could I possibly get kind of 50 teachers after school trying to use this tool that we had? I thought there was no chance. And so that's when I essentially started to use some of my programming skills that I learned at university and in my in my career as a software engineer, to start kind of coding and kind of building our first product, which at the time was called Show My Homework. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
That's awesome. So that gave you a first-hand view when you're an assistant head. First of all, if you're a classroom teacher, um, you see like the stress that's on not only yourself and your colleagues, but also the kids, right? To keep up with this fast-paced curriculum that is kind of like force-fed down our necks. But then when you become that assistant head, and you're now like looking after, like you said, how many staff people did you say?
We had about 70, 80 staff, consisting of teachers and support staff in one of the schools, and it was a similar size in the girls' school.
Wow. So then like you see the burning issue and you figure out something that is going to make life easier for everybody, and that's how you start the company. So do you still see that the same issues? I mean, I know obviously your company is doing a lot to solve this, but has the system itself, has it stayed the same? Has it got even, worse, or is it getting better? Could you give us an insight into what's going on at the moment within the system?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So my mindset of how I approached it was like we have to solve a problem, and so if you can solve a problem, those are the things that will improve engagement, and those ultimately are the technology tools that get used in schools, because teachers don't have the flexibility or the luxury of time. And so if they're going to be using your product, you've got to solve a specific problem. And so for us, it was always like, that Ronsil, it does what it says on the tin. And that's what we solved with the first kind of product, which was homework. So, but as we started to expand the product offering, because we always worked with kind of the senior leadership teams in schools, they always would approach us to say, hey, can you help us solve behavior? Can you help us solve detentions, or can you help us solve timetables? And that ultimately kind of helped shape how we develop the product from being a point solution to kind of a suite of products all under one roof that could solve much more problems. So like today, we have another product that essentially allows teachers to create seating plans using drag and drop, so they can more effectively create a seating plan, so they know where their vulnerable children are, where their gifted and talented children are, or if a child may have visual impairment or difficulties hearing. The teacher has all this background information in order to be able to create an optimum classroom seating environment, so they can help that child or those groups of children realize their potential better. So yeah, we've really expanded into a much broader kind of operating system for schools today.
Right, and people might be thinking it's a bit strange that I'd be asking you and inviting you onto the summit to talk about schools when this should be a homeschool summit. But it's my belief that coming out of COVID and everybody going back to school, schools, like, they're going to have to change. No, of course, the 100% of the world is not going to go just homeschool or world school or unschool or whatever. Schools are going to exist, and that's brilliant. How are they going to change in your mind? What needs to happen? And I think Satchel, what you're doing there, is one stepping stone to the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and we also support a large community of parents, right, who often do much more work outside of what the school has given them, whether it's enrichment, whether it's non-academic related. There's lots of work that there's lots of interactions that we have with parents, and so if I think about this challenging kind of the status quo of what schools look like in the future, I think you're going to see a much more of a hybrid model where schools won't I mean, this may be too much forward thinking, but actually I think schools, there's definitely opportunities for schools to be how can I say it, more flexibility in terms of kind of having a fixed timetable, having more flexibility around the interests of what kids do, whether that's at home or whether that's in school. I'm probably not articulating this very well, Dan. So we might have to do this particular question again, or we might have to edit it. But
no, I get what you're saying. It's like, you know, how can we give a little bit of power back to the teacher in the classroom, and how can we give a little bit more flexibility and room to breathe and room to learn and room to figure out what they're interested in to the student? And technology does that.
exactly, right. It's like, kind of, can you create an environment where, you know, kids can drop in and drop out of classes? So you fundamentally have a core, right, in terms of basics, foundations for literacy, numeracy, manners, like, you know, all these kind of, you know, grit, discipline, all these kind of things that you can teach kids through different, through less prescriptive studies of work. And so you can use the school buildings as a safe environment, you know, where students can gather, where students can connect, where you can have professionals there. But I think that there's a, you know, there's lots of research that shows that actually those schools that have a strong connection with home have significantly better outcomes in terms of achievement. And so you're really kind of marrying kind of the parent relationships, you know, with the students and with the school. And so that triangle, you know, lots of schools today face lots of challenges around how do they break down those barriers of involving parents, right? That notion of kind of 2.4 children is very different today than what it was maybe 50 years ago. The makeup of families is just is completely different, and we have much larger, you know, largest classroom sizes with a different variety, different varying needs within the classroom. And so if classrooms are under all this pressure, right, teachers under this pressure, there's got to be a way where we can kind of reduce that pressure and involve parents more into the equation, so they really are part of the equation, a part of the education, not just come, we'll see you at parents' evening and 10 weeks later.
Yeah, exactly. What's what you're describing is the perfect scenario. Like, you know, it becomes a learning center where people can go to learn rather than go to be, you know, taught at, which and to your point, we've been doing this for 100 or 200 years. Isn't it time to experiment with something else? Has this experiment run its course? So what do you think, as well, coming out of COVID, coming out of this pandemic, how's that going to affect the classroom going forward? Because we're going to have teachers now that might not be comfortable going back to school and being around so many other people, that might have been psychologically affected in some way, or might just want to go full remote and freelance teach and live a more location independent lifestyle. Are you seeing any kind of is there any market signals in that, in your business, that you've seen so far?
Not particularly from nothing that I've seen specifically, but just from, if I look at it from a macro level, right? People today, especially kind of, you know, this new generation, they value their freedom much more than money. And I think, you know, there's lots of research that shows that you know, we're going to see more and more people being self-employed, more and more people, you know, the gig economy. People value time. They value being able to do things on their own accord. And in one way, you know, it's kind of worrying because we've got this global shortage of teachers, right? But the gig for being a teacher today isn't that great. You know, I mean, it's not, you know, the adverts are great, but fundamentally, when you get down to the nitty gritty, it's a really, really tough profession. and no one goes into it for the money. It's for the love. And I think, but what is a little sad is the way it's currently set up. We are draining talent. We are draining talent because you can get talent through the door, but keeping them there is the kind of $64,000 question, right? And that is something that I believe, like here in the UK, the government have struggled for the 7th year running. They've not been able to meet their recruitment targets. But I mean, that problem is not just UK, right? It's a global problem. And we are seeing that, like, what this pandemic has really showed is, from a parent perspective and also from a teaching perspective, that actually there is a world where you can do teaching and learning online. People that were nervous, that were scared about actually, having a Zoom session, are no longer scared. That fear is gone. And so, that will kind of continue to open up new models, right? And new ways in which people will access learning. And so I think that's really exciting. But also, yeah, I meant at a macro level, because we see this in other sectors, like freelance sectors, tech sectors. People don't necessarily want a full-time job. They can work, if you've got a decent internet connection, or, you can pretty much work wherever. And I think actually we will see this, right? I also love the notion of, like, a coach, an instructor, and the fact that, like, you can still get a lot of job satisfaction and make a difference teaching, supporting children, but not necessarily being in a classroom. I mean, of course, there's a lot, I'm not taking anything away, right? I think, to be a qualified classroom teacher, to learn the pedagogy, to be able to learn all the kind of the theory behind it, and work in a school is amazing, right? But if we know that we cannot, if as you said, right, that game, we need to play a different game. We almost need to think about that differently. Otherwise, we will not have the talent that we need in education, right? And that will impact, future generations for sure. So it's, again, I don't know if I've answered that question, but it's like a double-edged sword. Because naturally, yeah, you see people that want to do more freelance work. They want to work on their own hours. That trend is only increasing. And at the same time, yeah, there's a shortage of teachers. So,
yeah, it's a difficult one, but that's where companies like yourself come in and build the technology for the future. And this is, I think that's why I wanted to have some entrepreneurs on that are building things for the education space, so everybody can get a real good rounded picture of what's going on and what's being built, and just be able to make a more informed decision about education going forward. Do you think, I mean, your product, does that lend itself to the homeschool community at the moment, or will it? For me, I think it does, but
Yes, so we have a number of folks that actually use it for homeschooling, but it's really more to kind of help them structure their day, help them to kind of set up their week, so they can use the kind of tools that we have to kind of say, right, there's X, Y, and Z to do work, there's X, Y, and Z to play. And so, yeah, we already have lots of use cases like that. I think we can do more and more by supporting kind of homeschool families to access resources that are available, because that's the other problem, right? There's like thousands and thousands of resources out there. From a homeschool, from a parent perspective, which are the right resources that are going to be useful for my son or daughter, depending on their needs? And I think that's something we can certainly do more of. We certainly see ourselves more of a facilitator. So trying to bring, partners and people in the ecosystem to be able to use our tools more, more in the homeschool market. Yeah, and we also have lots of kind of tutoring centers as well, who will or tutors will use our product, but they'll be working with homeschool kids or families that are homeschooling their children. So they'll use our tool in that way.
Right, that's perfect, because as anybody that is homeschooling or world schooling or have done any kind of home teaching, they know like the scheduling and getting everything like laid out, trying to follow a plan. And as Mike Tyson famously said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? It just, yeah, you could have that day set out, but then just something comes along and just throws in a curveball. Hopefully it's another learning opportunity and you just get taken down this rabbit hole of learning about whatever that is. But having something there, having like a planning tool and having that thing to fall back on and rely on and just try and keep everybody in check, I think in fact, I think that is almost giving your child a superpower at a very early age, because if they're interacting with it and building their own days, because we don't do that at school, right? We get our timetable handed to us at the start of the year and that's that.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that as well, right? It's that, a lot of low level issues that happen in school is because of boredom. Kids are not malicious, inherently they're, kids are not malicious, but if they're bored, that's when you start getting the low level disruption. And I think those are the things that drive teachers mad, which ultimately leads to teachers kind of, moving away from the profession, right? Walking away from it. And so that game doesn't really benefit the students or the teachers. And we know how important it is. Like every single day counts in terms of teaching and learning when you're working towards a goal. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, how do we, within that schedule, right? How can we provide that right level of kind of, basics, core skills that you need to master alongside kind of enrichment activities that where the kids can follow their passions.
Do you find teachers coming to work with you guys? Are you getting a good mix of like skills at Satchel?
Yeah. So we have a quite a few like ex-teachers, who are either secondary school teachers or primary school teachers. We certainly have teachers within the team. You're right. Actually, we also get teachers apply who are, as I said, unfortunately, they still want to work in education, just not in a school. That tends to happen. I think you need that really if you work in education, whether it's for in any market, having teachers that have being at the in the trenches, so to speak. They can really help you shape understanding the needs and kind of how to solve those needs.
Yeah, for sure. And I've said before, like it's the teachers I find are just as stuck in the system as the kids, and it's as you've experienced yourself firsthand being in the classroom. So what do you think that if you could wave a magic wand over the current system as it is now, what would be the first thing that you would implement that you think would make a big difference to both teachers and students alike, that would just create a much kind of calmer atmosphere, somewhere that is more akin to lighting that passion of learning?
Yeah, that's a tough question, but I think I'd start first of all by paying our teachers a lot more to make them a really respected and valued member of our society. I think that is a fundamental issue. It's probably the only profession where you do so many discretionary hours, right? Where you get zero remuneration. So at some point, over time, your enthusiasm, dries up because of the constant. It's constant, right? Teaching is definitely not easy. And when you're working with kids all day, you need a lot of energy. and a lot of enthusiasm. Otherwise, they see it, and then that impacts their teaching and engagement. And so I don't think money's money's one part of it, right? And secondly, I think, I love this idea of like being able to have, that framework. I haven't, I'm sure there's lots of errors with it, but kind of having a base layer where everyone knows everyone has to get to that base layer. And then alongside it, you have the ability to kind of drop in and drop out of classes. And you have, different things that the kids can, you can make them aware of, without being too rigid. And I think that's the part of journey of like, when you're growing up, right, it's about having opportunities to kind of explore, try, do different things. And I think, and you don't know, right? You could be, sometimes you don't know what you really want to do in life until you're 50. You might, I met people that are much older, on their journey, but they really found what they wanted to do when they were 50. And so how can we expect a young person to really know what they want to do by the time they're like 16? We can't. What we can do is, show them how to hustle, show them how to have some grit, make sure they have their core basics are very, very strong, because then what you're fundamentally doing is they're prepared to be ready for life or ready for college. It doesn't really matter. It's not just about being ready for college and getting straight A stars. It's about being, being ready for life. And I think, I'm not sure what I would rip out. I mean, there's an element of like, should our end of year exams really that valuable? The only other thing I've got from end of year exams, right, is the discipline that you get from being on your own, right, with no one to help you, and finishing. And I think when I think about professional exams, like, chartered accountancy or law, at some point in time, I think that's a really good skill to be able to say, can you get over that wall where there's no, you have to apply yourself. The content may be useless, right? Might be nothing you might ever use again, but the ability to kind of see something through and finishing. And I think those were the things I always took away from kind of exams, not so much the content, but like, could I sit there on my own, prior to the exam, could I apply myself and then finish? And, as I told you at the start, when I was when I was 16, I did that miserably, right? I got all lower letters of the alphabet. I was looking around the exam hall, still remember, thinking, what's everyone doing? Because I had nothing to write after about 5 minutes. And it was only later on in college that I had to kind of, learn that skill of being disciplined, seeing something through. And that took, I benefited from that as I went to university because we had to have exams. But yeah, looking back, most of the stuff I learned at uni was crap, Sorry, I shouldn't really say that, but I didn't learn anything really from those exams that I took. But it was that finishing. And, everyone can start, but I think it's the finishing that really matters. But I think at the same time, you need to give children the opportunity to start things, and different things. So yeah, maybe I'm.
It comes back to giving the kids like just a little bit more choice in their day-to-day life, right? And how is that like this like weird, far out there, wacky kind of thought? Like, think about that. Let's give the kids just a little bit more choice throughout their day rather than just A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah, when you say it like that, right, it's like, why would we not do that? I mean, we do, right? We see like, Scandinavian countries, they do that, right? There's a lot of innovation. Even in the US, there's a lot of innovation. I mean, the homeschooling segment is the fastest growing in the world, right? I mean, that anyway. But it's really interesting to see there are, a lot more folks challenging the status quo, that actually you can do teaching and learning, and it can, and your children can have a different perspective, and you can do all of those things and more outside of the traditional schooling system. That, there's more than one way to do it, essentially.
Yes, for sure. And just to round this off, do you have any messages to anybody out there, teachers, parents, students alike, that might be watching, about Satchel and how it might be able to help them throughout their day, whether they're homeschooling, world schooling, or in traditional school?
Well, I hate pitching, but I would say, look, our vision at Satchel is like, to be together through education. So whether you're a student, you're a teacher, you're a parent, a coach, our vision is to try and provide the tools and services that can help you through your journey in education, whatever stage you may be at. So, I'm not sure whether we can help you or can't help you, but if we can, yeah, please reach out, and we'll do our best to support you. And if we can't, we definitely know someone else that will be able to help you. So yeah,
That's perfect.
Please.
And that's well, I'll do the last pitch for you, and that's teamsatchel.com, where people should head over and check out Naimish and all of his work. Thank you so much for your time today, Naimish. I think it's wonderful that you put some time aside to come on and discuss this incredible company that you're building, and very important topic.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.